Good afternoon. We will call the meeting of the 911 Advisory Board for September 28th into session. It's 1:07 p.m. Mr. Dumais, please call the roll.
Okay. Chief Scott Howland.
Present.
Charles Burdan.
Present.
Charles Cullen.
Present.
Paul Truxell.
Present.
Sheriff James Maley. Sheriff Corey Honea. Chief Michael Miller.
Present.
Chris Herron.
Present.
Chief John Peters.
Present.
Chief Craig Carter.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. Item number 2 on the agenda is approval of the June 28th meeting for 2017. Are there any corrections? Hearing no corrections, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Troxel. Mr. Dumais, please call the roll.
Chief Scott Howland.
Yes.
Charles Burdan.
Aye.
Charles Cullen. Paul Truxell.
Aye.
Sheriff, oh, he's absent. Chief Michael Miller.
Aye.
Chris Herron.
Aye.
Chief John Peters.
Aye.
Chief Craig Carter.
Aye.
Approved.
Okay. At this point, we will go into closed session to discuss 911 outages within California. We will provide an overview of the findings when we return. So we are now in closed session. Okay, we'll call the meeting back into order, and our counsel, Alex, will report out on the closed session.
Sure, sir. So Alex Powell here. I'm the Assistant Chief Counsel here for Jill Talley. And just to confirm, as Pat said, we conducted a closed meeting session to discuss 911 outages protected by the attorney-client privilege as well as statutory exemptions to the Bagley-Keene Act.
Thank you. Also, please let the record note that Sheriff James Maley has joined our panel. Okay, item number 4 is legislative update with Lori Nuzora presenting for our legal team.
Thank you. So up on the screen, you can see that we've been tracking some bills that have to do with telecom and broadband topics this session. We're at that point in the session where anything that has been passed has to the governor's desk, and he has 30 days to act on it. So the first item you see is AB 375. And actually, this bill was held. It's in the Senate. It's on the inactive file, so it's become a 2-year bill. We're in the first year of a 2-year legislative cycle, so it can and might be brought back again next year. AB 1665 by Assemblymember Garcia. This bill was enrolled. It was sent to the governor just this past Tuesday. And then finally, SB 649 by Senator Hueso, the Wireless Telecommunications Facilities Bill. This bill was also enrolled and sent to the governor on September 21st. So again, the governor has until roughly mid-October to act on these bills. I think there are a couple federal bills. Are they on the slides? 2. Thank you. Not a lot going on with legislation at the federal level. This Senate bill, U.S. Senate Bill 102, Securing Access to Networks in Disasters Act by Senator Cantwell, It has passed the Senate, but it has not been referred to any House committees. And then finally, HR 588, Securing Access to Networks and Disasters Act by Representative Pallone. This bill hasn't moved since April, so, and if you know federal legislation, it happens really quick all at once, so I can't tell you today whether or not it will move or not. But we have all been watching the news, so we know that Congress is working on tax reform and health care right now. So that concludes my presentation. Do you have any questions for me about these or any other bills? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Okay, next item up on the agenda is item number 5. On August 3rd, Cal OES Director Mark Ghilarducci sent correspondence to the city of Sacramento regarding a routing of 911 wireless calls, and I believe we have Chief Hahn from Sacramento PD here to address the board.
Good thing he turned that on. I'm terrible with technology. Good evening, or good afternoon. Yeah, I want to give an update on that. I'm Daniel Hahn, Police Chief with the Sacramento Police Department. On two things. One, the answer times for 911 and also the direct receiving of cell phone 911. So just recently, actually this week, or excuse me, this one wasn't this week. Just recently, Council approved 10 new dispatcher positions to our staffing, so that's great. We've also, we plan on having all those hired by April of 2018. We have most of them in backgrounds now. The council also just this week approved a waiver for PEPRA to hire back our recently retired dispatchers before the 6 months, so they're ready to go, come back and answer phones. They've also approved us to overhire in the dispatch center, and then I just recently approved overtime for both, well, not overtime for light duty, but to put light duty officers in the comm center to answer phones, to approved overtime for officers to come in and answer phones, and then the dispatchers have always been working overtime to answer phones. And then on October 1st, we are going to request to accept all 911 cell phone calls. And so we think that will take 3 or 4 months total to have all the carriers flip over. And so that's our update. We've already improved the call time. So at the time of the letter, we were at 82% of the time. Year to date, we're at 84. And then this last month, with all those things we just started a few weeks ago, we're now at 89%. So we expect to get up to 95 relatively quickly. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions from any of the board members?
Well, let me add, I have our dispatch manager, Debbie Grady, here. So especially since you're getting ready to ask questions, I'm assuming I'm probably not going to be able to answer those. So that's why she's sitting right here.
Chief, can you give us an idea of what your plans are for training these officers that are coming into the dispatch center?
Yeah, we have a whole training plan, but I'm going to hand that over to Debbie because she's the one that put that together.
Thank you.
Here you go.
Hi, thank you. So right now we do have about half a dozen officers that are already trained and deployed to the dispatch floor. Chief authorized 24 hours of overtime every day that the officers can fill if it's not taken and worked by dispatch staff. So initially we bring the officers in and they complete a 5-hour CAD training class. They then spend 12 hours of hands-on training on the dispatch floor with one of our CTOs, and they're taught how to answer non-emergency calls. We estimated that by having the officers in there to work and focus on the non-emergency calls, which is our biggest call volume, they should offload about 25% of our call volume so that the dispatchers can be freed up to answer the 911 calls.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Comment, if I may. Chief, congratulations on the new position. And I just want to recognize you and say thank you for taking swift action. It looks like you have a multifaceted approach of that, and I'm excited to see, action with the city council support to actually make a significant difference in there. And then I also, from the CHP perspective, say thank you for taking those 911 calls, because that will also help us greatly too. And I think through that team effort, we can actually really improve service to the public. So thank you.
Thank you. I've heard that CHP thank you about 4 times in the last 20 minutes. And then I have to say that the only reason I took swift action is because a lot of harassment from Debbie. So
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Chief. We really appreciate your participation. Item number 6 is a First Responders Network Authority update. So as was reported to you at our June meeting, on June 19th, FirstNet released the draft state plan and posted it on a secure public portal. There was a number of representatives from throughout the state agencies that reviewed the state plan. And then we also had a commitment to our public safety partners throughout the state to reach out to them and to share with them to the greatest extent we could information regarding the proposed plan from FirstNet. So in the course of 45 days, we held 12 meetings around the state, from as far north as Reading to as far south as San Diego. And we had a total of almost 800 attendees at those meetings, so we had very good participation from our public safety partners. We received a number of feedback forms, either as a direct result of those meetings, at the end of those meetings, or via online submittal. And from those forms, we garnered 687 comments that we submitted to FirstNet on August the 4th. On the September 19th, FirstNet, as was predicted by them or as promised by them, did deliver the last update to the state portal, which provided some degree of clarification of some of the items. On the 20th, and I should also say that during the 6-week period between August the 4th and September the 19th, the Cal OES team met with AT&T and FirstNet every single week to bring forth the issues that were of great importance to the state of California. On September 21st, we received a letter of commitment from AT&T, or I should say a letter of what their intents were. Can't say that there's a commitment in any of those promises, but they did say what their intent was. And then on September 22nd, we received from FirstNet and AT&T the responses to the 687 comments. We are kind of at a crossroads with those comments, as we have promised those that did submit those comments that we would present them with the answers to those comments. But we have been working through a legal, let's say, tightrope that is encumbering our ability to provide those answers back to those specific individuals. So we're trying to work that through right now. The issue is that the answers were deemed to be proprietary and confidential, which makes it very difficult to release it to those individuals that have proposed those questions. So we're trying to work through that. We hope to get that resolved very soon. I think it is safe to say that in the 687 comments, the preponderance of concern was coverage. There's a significant amount of coverage and capacity questions that were raised both during the meetings as well as in the responses online. Lack of clarity in the cost was another big issue. This pie chart, if you kind of shows you a breakdown of what those were. We have received a very strong commitment from AT&T to ensure CLETS and CJIS security for those law enforcement agencies that have to have access through this broadband system. So that's a good sign. And then as the path forward, we do have our next CalFIRN board meeting on October the 11th, where we will discuss the offerings from FirstNet and AT&T, and then we will be forwarding a recommendation onto the director of Cal OES, who has the communications with the governor, and will be providing input to the governor's decision. the legislation that, set up the FirstNet board allows the governor 90 days from the receipt of the final state plan to make an opt-in, opt-out decision. That clock has not started to run yet because there was some critical information missing from other federal agencies that we expect within the next day or two. So we are expecting that the decision will need to be made sometime between Christmas and New Year's. Hopefully they'll give us a couple days after that, but we'll see. So if there's any questions, I'll try to answer those. Okay, on to agenda item number 7, the 911 Emergency Communications Branch Report from Mr. Courier.
All right, well, thank you. So this is in your binders, and for those in the audience, it's up on the, everything that's in here is up on the screen. So this gives you an idea what we'll be talking about in order. I'll start with text to 911, and we'll work all the way through the status of the SETNA. And please, if you have questions or need additional information, please feel free to interrupt at any time, and I'll provide whatever you need. So the first slide shows our text to 911 deployment status. We have 90 PSAPs that are deployed. So what that means is they're ready to take text to 911 today. They may or may not have done their media outreach event yet and notified the public of that, though. So we track things a little differently. We just participated in August for the Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito counties had their media event. We were there. They actually did a live text to 911 session that was recorded by the media. So that was a really interesting interactive piece that went. CHP hosted that event, did a fantastic job. It was really well run. And the next major announcement is due out in beginning of December when LA County will have their media event. So if you're interested in participating in that, let me know. There are several PSAPs who have submitted their letter to the FCC of their intent to start beginning text to 911, and then some have selected the carrier that they're going to use for text to 911. Once a PSAP notifies the 911 branch, it's about a 6-month process, and so we track them as they go through the process. One thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be sending out a letter to all PSAPs that have not yet let us know their deployment plan, and we're going to ask them to submit that plan back to us by the end of this year, and then the goal will be to try and have this deployed statewide by the end of 2018. So that's the text to 911 deployment status. Any questions there?
Well, no question, but just a comment. Maybe my last one if we actually go live in December in LA. But just reminding everyone, I've said this at other meetings, you know, we're hoping for some really good media coverage when we go live in LA County. We have almost every PSAP, including the 2 biggies, City of LA and LA Sheriff, just a couple of small cities that aren't on board, but I think it's just 4 out of the 70-plus PSAPs.
2 now.
Oh, we're down to 2.
Down
Great.
to just
so
2.
Even a change from our meeting a couple weeks ago. So it's really just a message to everybody else in the state who hasn't made plans to move forward with this, that the time is now to contact the office because people are going to start wondering, well, why aren't we doing text to 911 in my city or my community? So that's my comments. Thanks, Budge.
All right, hearing no more, we'll move on to the next topic, which is the Wireless Technical Routing Analysis Project. So each quarter, we take a different segment of the state. We look at every cell sector in that geographic area, and we map how many transfers are happening, and then we look at all those sectors and see if that first PSAP that the call is routed to is the correct one. So this report shows that we looked at 142,000 sectors and we rerouted 15,000. And it gives the breakdown on the slide of where they were rerouted to and from. In some cases, the call was first going to the PSAP and should have been going to CHP. And in other cases, it went to one PSAP and should have gone to another. And yet, in some cases, it was going to CHP and should have gone directly to the PSAP. So this is an ongoing process that we're going to be going through, and now, thanks to SAC-PD, we now have all those agencies accepting wireless, and I've got that statistic as well. So any questions on this process? All right, thanks to CHP for the help they provide in this effort. It's a significant effort, you can imagine, to go through all this work.
And Budge, thank you for your staff. It's really a team effort and a collaboration that's getting it done. And I think, looking at the stats, I think it shows that the intent of the process is working because we're identifying those sectors that we need to move. We're actually going through that process and getting them moved. And I think ultimately the public's getting better service as a result.
So the next slide has the wireless deployment status. Really, the only agency currently not accepting wireless is Atherton PD. We will discuss with them their plans as well. And all of the other agencies are either accepting wireless calls today or are aggressively on that path to accept them. And so we hope to be able to port out the next board that this list is, everyone is accepting wireless. The next slide is really focused on some of the work that our PSAP advisors are doing as they work with the PSAPs around the state through their fiscal and operational review. So we call it a FOR for short. And really what they're doing is they're monitoring the system to make sure that they're in compliance with the standards and all the technical requirements that have been established either through the branch or through the statutory requirements. And our goal is to meet with every PSAP at least once every 5 years. We've kind of stepped that up a little bit. We would like to meet with them more often than that. The 5-year metric was based on CPE replacement cycles, but we see a huge value here that we can provide to the PSAPs and helping them understand, kind of mid-cycle as they're preparing for replacing their call answering equipment, some of the things they should be looking at. We also validate the number of trunks that are going into that particular PSAP, and that all the tools and technology that we provide, that they don't have any questions on it as far as monitoring the health of the network, their PSAP and the number of calls coming in. Last quarter, we did about 30 fiscal and operational reviews, 33 to be exact, and our target is to do at least 30 every quarter, and we're probably going to beat that each and every quarter, but that's the goal. And Alicia and her group is the ones heading that up, and they've been doing just a fantastic job. Any questions on the FORs? This next slide is intended to give you just a quick snapshot of where we're at with contracts that are currently in the process of being renewed. The first one is the foreign language contract. It's set to expire in September. We've got an amendment process in place to extend that through March while we work through some of the work with Department of Technology and DGS to get the next vendor on board for that. The next gen IFB has been in place now for many months, and we've got 2 contracts awarded through that right now, one for the northeast portion of the state through ROI Networks, working with Synergym to build out an ESI net for 36 PSAPs up there. The second one was awarded to AT&T in the Pasadena area for 8 PSAPs there. That same contract vehicle we're looking to leverage to deploy statewide NG911, and we hope to be releasing that process, and I'll talk a little bit about that on a later agenda item. We hope to release the next offer late fall, early 2018 to keep that process moving forward. The text to 911 IFB has been, we did our pre-solicitation meetings, and we actually have the formal IFB out. It's published on the Department of Technology website if you're interested in taking a look at it. That'll obviously be a many-month process as we go through the selection and who the vendor is on board. And we have a current text to 911 contract that will remain in place until this new vendor is selected, or vendors. And the next gen 911 transition plan is complete. All of that is posted on our website, and I'm going to talk about that as a separate agenda item. So any questions on contracts or where we're at with those? All right. Hearing none, this is the next gen update. So last time I was here, we were on an aggressive schedule to go visit these areas that you see on the state to conduct 7 different meetings. We did that. We completed it. We ended up having about 358 folks attend those meetings. So if you think of the fact we have 441 PSAPs, some of those are duplicates, multiple folks from the same PSAP coming, but this is a pretty good outreach effort. What we learned in these meetings was that our plan, as we've advertised it out on our website and the presentation that we gave, is in line with what the PSAPs need, and it's going to meet their operational need. There are a couple of gaps, most notably in the area of GIS, and so we're going to have to figure out a way to address that. And that we'll have a plan to do that. We're still working through some of those details. So this is a graphic that I think I described kind of through hand motions last time, but it describes the pieces of the puzzle that we've got to put into place in order to get next-gen 911 to become a reality in California. The first is technology. We'll be building to the NENA I3 standard. That's what we're going to be using. We're even discussing how we can include a validation process in the vendor selection. So once we select a vendor to build an ESI net, to actually validate that they're I3 compliant. That's important when you consider we're going to have multiple ESI nets and multiple vendors that need to share, potentially share information one with another as you transfer calls. So the technology is fairly well progressed. We have a really good plan that identifies the roadmap forward. And really, I think one of the keys to that has been the collaboration. Obviously, the collaboration with the PSAPs was an important part of this. We also met with 14 different vendors who provide these services to make sure that we described to them our plan and that it was actually able to be realized. It was implementable. And then we met with the carriers who are delivering the 911 calls, who will have to interface with these aggregation points into the next-gen 911 network to make sure that what we're designing can be supported by them as well. The last piece of that carrier integration is to make sure that we reach out to the cable providers. They're the ones we have not sat down face-to-face with yet. We'll be doing that soon. And so this collaboration is ongoing. The information we'll try and make as public as we can to make sure that we don't overlook anybody in this process. Funding is obviously important. We have to make sure that the funding is in place to support this. As we discussed in this group, we do have some contingency funding that we're using for the rest of this fiscal year, but after that, we're really looking at ways to shore up the SETNA funding model in order to make sure we can not only maintain legacy, but build out next gen. Procurement is an important consideration because once you've got the plan and you've collaborated and you know the plan is good and you've got the funding, now you've got to have the procurement vehicle to go out and get the services you need. We're looking very closely at the next-gen IFB we've got out there now to make sure that it meets our needs, and we'll be working closely with the Department of Technology to make sure that the SLAs and terms and conditions in that contract meet the needs. So that's kind of where we are at a high-level overview. Again, from a conceptual standpoint, our focus is to take this legacy network, which we walked through last time that we were here, and replace all of that with an ESI net and provide aggregation points for the carriers to interface with that network. Some states have tried to use the legacy components as part of the transition, and what that does is it drags out the process. We'd like to make a parallel path where we build out this network completely IP, and then once we get it built out, tested, vetted, we just transition the services over and shut off the legacy network. And that's what we've been discussing with everyone who will listen, I suppose, including you guys. So this is what the plan looked like the last time I was here. From when we published these slides till now, we've learned a few new pieces of information. And on this slide, that LA City and LA County, those will probably become one region. And Orange County, which you see up there in yellow, will go down to the southern region. So this slide will probably change. Again, these are sort of working documents as we work through the process. So when I come back in December and talk with you all, we'll probably have an updated graphic here, but that's what we're thinking makes more sense. 4 regions and then a prime, each one can back the other up, and that's the plan moving forward. The reason why we broke the state up the way we did is because of call volume and obviously number of PSAPs and who those PSAPs interact with. So this graphic shows the calls per region on that previous slide. The numbers change slightly with the change I just described. LA goes up to about 8 million. Well, matter of fact, I have the exact numbers. The LA region will go to about 8.6 million, and the southern region will go to 5.1 million. The rest of the numbers on there stay the same with that change. So that's what we're looking at from a regional perspective, and obviously call volume is important, and any one of these regions is larger than most states. So it's important to keep kind of the scope of things in mind as we move forward.
Bud, you mentioned that Southern would go to 5.1 or 6, or should it be 6.1?
Southern will be 7.1 million, and the LA region is 8.6.
Okay, 7.1, you said 5.1.
Oh, it's dyslexia kicking in, I think. And like I said, I have an updated graphic that we can post on our website and make it publicly available. It was just too late to post for the meeting rules of this meeting. So the next slide talks a little bit about what it will cost. And so if you take a look at this graphic, where we are today is in the upper left-hand corner of that graph. About 104, depending on the year, is what it takes, 104 million to maintain our existing network. So as you move down through the chart, what happens is legacy components can be moved into an ESI net, and some of those legacy components, region by region, can be turned off. So the end state would be that last row of the chart. That 50 million you see in legacy, we've broken the network up so that the call answering equipment is not part of the NG911 update necessarily. We will touch each and every PSAP on their regular equipment refresh cycle so that eventually every PSAP will be I3 compliant and capable to interface directly with an NG911 network. But until we get to that point, what we'll do is we'll just have a gateway there at the PSAP and convert that over into that CAMA trunk that they're expecting and deliver that to the call answer equipment. That way we don't need to do a forklift upgrade on all the call answering equipment statewide, which would, greatly increase this cost. So that last number there, 147 million or roughly 150 million, is what we think the steady state will be when we get next gen fully implemented, and that will be our reoccurring sort of budget. Obviously that number moves around a lot as large PSAPs replace equipment. The CPE costs go up and down. And so this number is going to fluctuate up and down. It can swing as much as 10 to 12 million a year, depending on the size of the PSAPs and their replacement cycle that are replacing. So that gives you an idea from a planning perspective of what we're looking at in order to keep 911 moving forward. The funding plan, like I said, in the near term is to use the fund balance we have to support NG911, and then we're working on updating the SETNA funding model so that NG911 can be supported moving forward. From a procurement perspective, in the near term, we want to use the existing IFB that we have out there so that we can build this network out. The contract's in place, and then we make an offer and come up with a statement of work that they have to build to for that specific application. In the long term, we know there's going to be a need to change that. The way the contract rules work right now, that contract is good for the next 3 to 5 years, and then the contract term ends. So any services that we put in on that contract, we would have to go out with a new contract, no guarantee what vendor would win, so you could get a working ESI net up and functioning. A different vendor wins the next contract round. You have to rip out that whole IP network and build a completely new network. That's not a good way to do next gen. So we'd like to look at a reoccurring contract similar to CalNet. You can think CalNet, it will be a little different than that. But that idea that the services transition from one contract to the next so that when you get a vendor in place and they're performing, then they can just be transitioned to the next contract. The other alternative is to use a tariff. And tariffs are what we use to support the network today. They've been in place for, some of them, decades. So that would be the other option. There's pros and cons of both. And we're going to work through long-term solutions and which one is best as we have follow-on conversations. But that's the procurement plan. The deployment timeline is, I've been told, is very aggressive. You're probably not surprised, judging by the work that my team has been able to do in the last year. So we would like to begin building out the prime ESINet in January of 2018. And then this timeline will get shuffled a little bit with the combining LA County and LA City. So I expect a few more changes to this timeline between now and December, but in December I'll come up with an updated chart. By then we should know if the current contract vehicle is going to be able to be used to do everything we need to in the near term, and we'll have a much better idea of these timelines. But I wouldn't expect the last bullet to change. My goal is still to get all the selective routers and all the legacy network decommissioned by the end of 2022. So before we go on, any questions on next gen? Because that's a lot to digest in 10 or so minutes. All right, hearing none. We're in the process of making some updates to the operations manual. Chapter 3, well, the CPE contract was executed with 9 vendors. Because it's a new CPE contract, Chapter 3 of the operations manual has been updated to reflect that. So if you're due for an equipment replacement, you're going to want to go out there and look before you start that process. If you had already submitted your paperwork, you're in the old contract and the old rules apply. So those are some of the bullets that you see up there. There's some refinements to incremental cost. We've added in hosted solution, which is very important. And we've obviously got some language in there about text to 911 deployment and what that looks like. Any questions or comments on the operations manual? All right. This graph is our SETNA graph that we've been providing each advisory board. This has not changed since the last time we met. It will change for the December 14th meeting. The FY 2016-2017 numbers are now available to us. We have not officially received them yet. We know they're going to come soon. Once we get those numbers, everything you see in orange here is a prediction, so including 2016, 2017. So once we get the actual numbers, we'll go ahead and update this chart for you next time, but there hasn't been any changes. We know they're coming, but we haven't updated anything yet. We're still predicting sometime in FY 2018, 2019 that, the SETNA funding will drop below the expenditures. And that's what we show on this chart with the fund balance. And again, this is unchanged from the last time, but for the next board, when I get the numbers, we will make sure we update this.
And Budge, it looks like for several years at least that the SETNA fund has been relying on reserves from the previous year to stay in the black, and that is it's evident from these numbers that will end in the next fiscal year. So I know that the state office is working on a new funding formula, but obviously it's becoming more urgent with a potential deficit coming up in fiscal 2019.
Yeah, that's correct. We have been surviving on that rainy day fund, and it's been raining, and that fund is being depleted. All right, if there are no further questions for me.
Thank you, Budge. Okay, next up is a long-range planning committee report from Mr. Cullen.
We had a rather small group yesterday. Ryan did a great job from the state office in talking about a number of the issues that Budge has covered here previously, but I'll hit a couple of highlights and some issues that do have an impact on the PSAPs. The first one being the invitation for bid for a single provider for text to 911. As Budge indicated, the IFB, or invitation for bid, was released in September, on September 19th. Bids are due in November, and a the bid will be awarded in late January. Some important factors for the PSAPs to consider are, in the requirements in the IFB, is PSAPs using the legacy solution that is not awarded the bid. That is one of the two current TCCs, the one that does not receive the bid. If you are using that TCC, you will have to migrate over to the selected provider. And in order to do that, in order to mitigate that, the state is going to, or is hoping to extend the existing contract until March of 2019. So you would have a year to transition to the selected vendor after the bid is awarded. Transfer between the integrated and the over-the-top solutions, or the standalone solution, is required. Transfer between the selected vendor and the legacy vendor is not. So that's a critical point to consider. Language translation is listed as desirable but not required. So hopefully the vendors will provide that as a component of their bid, because that would certainly be a very helpful thing to have with text to 911. There's also the possibility that a vendor could bid on this contract that aggregates text from both TCCs and distributes those texts to the PSAP, and that would facilitate transfers between the competing TCCs and solve that problem for the PSAPs. Call answering times, I believe this was mentioned, but the state office is sending out a letter to the PSAPs that are below the threshold answering 911 calls within 15 seconds. The threshold is 95%. The state is set a lower threshold initially, and there are 24 PSAPs out there that are below 85% of the time, so they're being sent a letter that asks them to identify issues that impact their ability to answer those calls. The LRPC suggested that some additional questions be added to that survey. What is your allocated staffing level, and what is your current vacancy rate? Because we think that has a significant impact on the PSAP's ability to answer calls. Budge went over in detail the state SENet plan that has been revised, and LA City and County are now one region, and Orange County moving into the southern region. The current SENet deployments in Butte County, Budge talked a little bit about that. Butte County is back on its legacy solution while the new provider, ROI, deploys. And I think there's been some delays because ROI needs PUC approval. And the state is now requiring any of the vendors to get that in advance so that there won't be further delays when we go forward with the SENet projects. Pasadena Ring is being deployed by AT&T and West with a target date of March of 2018. And the final item we discussed is there, at a previous LRPC, there had been talk about creating a working committee for next-gen deployment, and there's been a lot of interest from the PSAPs. The state office is working on putting that group together, so hopefully in the December meeting we'll have some additional news on that, but obviously the state has been very busy this last quarter with a lot of projects, a lot of irons in the fire, as Budge put it, so great work is being done. I think there's a solid strategy for moving forward with a variety of issues that affect 911. Obviously, funding is going to be critical to all these endeavors, so hopefully we'll be moving forward on that as well. So, thank you.
Any questions?
A quick question for Budge regarding the IFB for the text provider, the TCC. If an agency requests to deploy text today, they make their selection, and then that changes after the top of the year, whenever that comes out, could there be a financial implication that could further hurt the SETNA fund? Part two of the question is, would it be worthwhile for agencies to hold off until that provider is selected?
We're not encouraging them to hold off, no, because that would give reason to hold off, and we are not sending that message. So we're trying to do everything we can in the transition to make sure that there's not a detrimental effect on the funding while we provide solutions to continue to move forward. So the short answer is no, please continue to make plans to transition and start taking text to 911.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you for Mr. Cullen. Okay, next item up is County Coordinators Task Force, Ms. Tracy Kessler.
Good afternoon. A lot of what I'm going to say has already been said. CCTF has been asked to provide an ongoing status report on the Text to 911 project. So the following is the status as of September 27th. Of the 441 statewide funded PSAPs, 90 have fully deployed. Some of the PSAPs have notified the public, the rest are in the process of arranging public notification. While it's not mandatory for deployment to be countywide, it is highly recommended that everybody right now go with the same TCC. Of course, that'll change maybe once a new vendor is selected or the new, or multiple vendors are selected or the aggregate solution. Text call volume varies slightly between counties, but the average is less than 1% of the total 911 call volume. Of the remaining 351 PSAPs, 105 have begun the deployment process by either working on their shapefiles, selecting the TCCs, working on IP exchange, or notifying the FCC and scheduling carrier testing. This leaves 246 PSAPs not yet participating in the 911 Text to 911 project. There are various reasons, although the most common reason that we've heard is staffing, and PSAP's worried that the text volume is going to impact their staffing and ability to answer 911s within the guidelines. The stats have not shown that to be a valid concern at this time, but you never know once things start rolling and more public education is out there and people start realizing that they can text to 911. So I think a lot of the PSAPs are kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. Cal OES branch, current text contract, as they've talked about, is due to expire the first quarter of 2018. The new IFB is out and due back in November, and they hope to have the contract awarded at the end of January. Cal OES branch also will be updating their operations manual with a new Chapter 10, which is a chapter regarding text to 911. The branch will also be sending the letter to SAP regarding text to 911 and their future plans, where they are in the process, and their future plans for when they will be taking text to 911. All I have, unless you have questions.
Thank you. Any questions, Ms. Kessler? Okay, moving on to agenda item number 10. In addition to the standing agenda for this meeting, does board members request any specific agenda item be added or addressed? Going once, going twice?
I do. I've heard a lot about a push for media as the text to 911 deployment goes. Could we get some feedback from those who have done those media press releases, those press days? How did they set that up? What were the points that they were trying to make? And then the turnout.
Okay.
Also on the text 911, it's a percentage less than 1% of the call coming in or text. Can we track the ones that have been on longest to see if they're starting to see an increase in those numbers? Maybe that'd be an indicator for us as well.
Got it. Okay, do we have anything else? Do we have any requests for public comment? Hearing none. Okay, we will entertain a motion to adjourn. For those of you who would like general information, please contact Mr. Dumais. His contact information is available on the slide. And for media information, please contact Mr. Mayberry. Information is also reflected on the slide. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second?
Second.
Do we need to vote? Okay, we're adjourned.